Now this wood is really in rough shape. It's very thick also, so rather than going straight to the jointer, I'm going to try to establish a straight line by using the track saw. Now it's off to the jointer, and we have to face joint one edge first to get a nice flat surface. Now I'm planing the boards down to thickness. I'm going to 1 5/8 here, just for the fact that later on when I have to plane it and sand it, we'll get it down to 1 1/2.
Okay, now I have everything laid out, the grain direction I want, and everything's perfectly aligned. What I need to do is, I marked out here so that I would know the exact face, kind of like I did on the cutting boards. Just make a pencil mark in the direction here so that I can line everything back up. In the event that I do take this off the table and move things around, I know which way it's going to be laid out again. Now, what I need to do is to make these seams a little tighter, I'm going to joint these with a hand jointer plane. So I'm going to put these in a bench vise, so we're going to clean that up now. Just going to chamfer these edges here to make it meet and look like a farm table. Give it that little bevel right in between, really give it that separation.
Here I'm going to use the biscuit joiner to help me align the boards during glue up. Now there's a lot of boards to glue up to the top. You get much better results when you use a lot of parallel clamps and glue the boards up in small sections like this. I'm using scrap pieces of wood as cauls for the top, and I'm going to clamp these down to the board. It's going to keep them as flat as possible, and it's just going to be easier for me to line everything up later after everything's glued.
Okay guys, we're about to start the trestles on the bottom. Top is all glued up, put it off to the side. This is going to be the trestle base. Now what I did was I took a piece of 1/2-inch plywood and I just made a template. And the reason I did that is because now I transfer it over onto here when I trace both pieces and I cut this massive 12-quarter piece of maple. What's going to happen is I'm going to get 2 identical pieces for each side of the table. So what I'm going to do is throw my safety equipment on, I'm going to run this through the table saw, rip it right down the middle, and then I'm going to bring it over to the jointer, pass it through the planer, and then we can start to put it onto the bandsaw and get our exact cuts.
Now I'm just using the oscillating spindle sander to get rid of all the bandsaw blade marks here so I can have a nice smooth rounded over edges. Now, if you don't have a disc sander, then take your belt sander and clamping it down to the workbench makes a great way to smooth over any rounded edges like this so you can get rid of the tool marks. Now here I'm working on the mortise and tenon. I'm going to use loose tenon joinery for the trestle base pieces. Now if you're not familiar with what this tool is, this is the Beadlock Pro Joinery Kit, and I do have a video on my channel for it. Now here I'm going across the joints and across the grain with a jack plane. This way I can rough out any of the high spots, and you'll see later on as I go along with the straight edge, I'm going to mark it all down. This way I can make a nice flat panel. After you rough out most of the high spots with a hand plane, go back with a straight edge and start to mark down the high spots that you weren't able to get, and then you're going to hit those with the belt sander. Now again, I'm going to use loose tenon joinery to install the breadboard ends, give it something to grab onto, because the whole thing can't be glued for expansion purposes. Now here I'm using one of my favorite tools. It's a card scraper, or some call it a cabinet scraper, and that's going to get rid of all the extra tool marks I have in there from the hand plane. Now I'm cutting the 45-degree angles for the X braces on the trestles. Now I'm installing these with glue and 16-gauge finish nails. Now here I'm applying the weathered oak stain. That's the particular color that the customer chose for this. Now that the stain has some time to cure, I can spray my coats of polyurethane, give me a nice brushless finish. Now I'm using spacer blocks here so that I can get the stretcher perfectly level on both sides of the trestle. Now here I'm covering up the leg screws with some oak dowels as wood plugs.